Determining the difference between personal property and real property is a fundamental requirement for the national portion of the real estate exam and is best understood through the application of the Maria test. A fixture is an item that was once personal property but has become real property because it is permanently attached to the land or a building. When you are sitting for your exam, you will likely encounter scenarios where a buyer and seller are arguing over who gets to keep the chandelier or the custom window blinds, and you must apply the 5 legal tests represented by the acronym Maria to determine the outcome. The first letter M stands for the method of annexation, which asks how permanently the item is attached to the property. If removing the item causes significant damage to the structure, such as a built-in bookshelf that is recessed into the wall, the law generally considers it a fixture. However, if it can be unplugged or unscrewed without leaving a hole or structural damage, it might still be personal property. The second letter A refers to adaptability, which looks at whether the item was custom-made for that specific space. A great exam example is a custom-cut rug that fits a uniquely shaped room or pool equipment designed for a specific filtration system. Even if these items are technically movable, their specific adaptation to the property suggests they should stay. The R in Maria stands for the relationship of the parties. This is a crucial concept because the courts tend to favor the buyer over the seller and the tenant over the landlord. If a dispute arises and the other factors are equal, the person who did not install the item often has the advantage in a legal setting. The fourth letter I is the most important factor on the exam, and that is the intention of the person who attached the item. You must ask if the person meant for the item to become a permanent part of the real estate. Since we cannot read minds, we look at the other factors to find evidence of that intention. Finally, the second A stands for the agreement of the parties. You must remember that a written contract always trumps the other 4 tests. If the sales contract explicitly states that the seller is taking the antique door handles, then those items remain personal property, regardless of how they are attached. You should also be prepared for questions regarding the documentation used to transfer these items. Real property is transferred using a deed, while personal property is transferred using a bill of sale. If an item is legally classified as a fixture, it is considered part of the real estate and will automatically transfer to the buyer via the deed unless it is specifically excluded. If a seller wants to leave a refrigerator, which is typically personal property, and the buyer wants to ensure it stays, they should ask for a bill of sale to document that transfer separately. A common exam scenario involves a seller who removes a ceiling fan after the house is under contract. Since a ceiling fan is attached by the method of annexation and is intended to be a permanent improvement, it is a fixture, and removing it without an agreement is a breach of contract. Another tricky area involves agricultural fixtures. For instance, if a farmer installs a fence to contain livestock, that fence becomes part of the land and is a fixture. However, if a business owner installs shelves in a rented retail space, those are trade fixtures, and the law treats them differently to support the growth of commerce. Trade fixtures remain personal property even when bolted down and can be removed by the tenant before the lease expires. A common trap on the exam is to include the cost of the item or the date it was purchased as part of the test. You must ignore these distractors because the value of an item does not determine if it is a fixture. By remembering that Maria helps turn personal property into real property and that the written agreement is king, you will be well prepared for any fixture questions on the national exam.